Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to Him forever.
We are going to now turn to the second part of the Divine Liturgy, the Liturgy of the Eucharist proper, beginning with the Great Entrance on page 42. And the Great Entrance and its hymn is something that's peculiar to the Byzantine Rite, where we, in very solemn procession, take the unconsecrated bread and wine into the sanctuary. And the hymn that we sing to this is a very familiar one, and one with lots of versions. At least partly because toward the end of the first millennium, there was actually an imperial edict that no new music was to be composed for the Byzantine Rite, because there were simply too many melodies and too many versions of things already in all the chant books. And the emperor made one exception. He said, except for the Great Entrance, because that's one that sometimes people would write a new one for a special occasion, or the birth of an imperial grandchild, or who knows what. And so we continue to accumulate melodies. And in our tradition as well, in our Slavonic chant books, we have upwards of 20 versions of music just for the cherubic hymn. Very often borrowed from Marian hymns, or other saints' hymns, or other kinds of, I don't want to folk melodies, but more popular music, which was used for the cherubic hymn. And in the book that we have here, we have 6 regular melodies, A through F. And I said previously, in general, just because you use an A melody at one point, doesn't mean you use it everywhere in the service. Of course, that's impossible because there are E's and F's, and there aren't that many melodies for everything. You can't do it that way. But
is it wrong to do it that way?
Well, you could always use the A melodies for everything. And you could always use B melodies. Yeah. And as soon as you get to C, you start running into cases where there is... They don't... In general, all the A melodies don't go together in a particular way. It's not like a Mass setting where you've got all the different parts of the Mass to the same kind of music. There are a few exceptions. For example, if you do the typical Psalms, if you do the simple melody, that's A, then you do them together. If you do the solemn, you do them together, that kind of thing. It changes a little bit here, because by tradition, the music that you use for the cherubic hymn is used again twice more later in the service. And we'll look at how that works. But first, we've got a total of... How many cherubic hymns are in this book? 9.
9, yes.
Okay, because there are more in the back. There are 6, A, B, C, D, E, F. There are 6 versions here, plus one for the departed, plus special ones for St. Nicholas and Nativity, which are in the back of the book. Okay? So let's look at these. The A melody is one that is very commonly used. Let us who mystically represent the cherubim. Everyone knows that. But how do you sing this? Well, it's a procession melody. Okay? And the procession may be just through the front of the church. It may be around the back of the church, but you really start singing as soon as the priest is beginning the Eucharistic prayer at the altar, and either he or the deacon end up incensing. So this is going to be sung a number of times. When it was done in Slavonic, the words were split up over several repetitions of the basic melody. So it would be sort of like singing, let us who mystically represent the cherubim. And so on. So the phrases would be repeated many times. You would end up singing this melody 3 times through, and that was generally about the right. And when we do it in English, since it was first said in English, we've pretty much avoided lots and lots of repeats. Okay, cutting up the text and repeating it. So instead, we'll tend to sing this about 3 times. I can't imagine singing it quite so fast that the priest would be done in 2, but it may take longer than 3 times, particularly if the priest makes a circuit of the whole church. Okay? So once you're used to how long it takes, sing it in a stately fashion. It's a processional, don't rush. Okay, but don't drag. Don't let your pitch drop. It's very natural. The longer you sing, when your voice gets tired, the pitch gets lower and lower and lower. Watch that. Fight it. Yes?
Again, the pitch selection, is flexibility in this one?
Pitch selection is up to you. It is based on what is comfortable for you and for the congregation. Okay? And that it may take once or twice in your parish to get used to what the people can sing comfortably. Okay? But we sing the first part of that. The deacon and the priest have commemorations in the middle of it. We sing the last part, that we may receive the King of all. And the word here in Slavonic is actually the one used for receiving Christ in Holy Communion. So the old translation, that we may welcome the King, was actually more suitable in the days when not many people received communion. But the translation here makes it very plain. From here on, we're looking forward to receiving Christ in Holy Communion. So we sing the first part multiple times. We listen to the commemorations and sing the third part. And then the arrow in the circle, we go to page 49. Don't skip there. Let's keep looking at these. The second one begins with one of these rising fourths. The Here Comes the Bride that I said really solidly establishes the melody. Let us mystically represent the cherubim. Now, the first part of this, every time you have descending notes, the tendency is to go flat. Okay? So every time you sing something like mystically, you want to be thinking high the whole time. It's always a little higher than you think it's going to be. So be careful there. And breathe. The other way to avoid going flat, use good breath support and a lot of air. So, how many people know this melody? Let us mystically. Okay. And the C melody. Let us mystically represent the cherubim. Show of hands. Okay, everybody knows that. D. Here's another one with this rising perfect fourth. Let us mystically represent the cherubim. And that's another place where those falling half notes, think really high. How many people know this one? See, we're used to a lot of, you may not think you know many of these, but you do. Okay? E. Now, I said some of these are based on Marian hymns or saints' hymns. Does anyone know this melody from somewhere else? Let us mystically. Yes?
I think it's a Canadian hymn. I'm trying to remember exactly where it comes from. It's very familiar.
There are a couple of Marian hymns that use it, but there's also, O Father Nicholas, renowned through every land. Right? Okay.
I don't know.
Wonder worker and helper to all in need. There are a number of different melody versions of that, but that's what this is. Okay? There's also there's a hymn to the Mother of God that uses that same melody. So that's one. And here's another one, the F version. Let us mystically represent the cherubim. A little more solemn, but also, what's this? Mary, look upon us and favor with your grace. So this is one that I preferentially use on Marian feast days. I just, and sometimes I'll sing Mary Look Up, like maybe Pokrov, the Feast of the Protection on October 1st. I might sing Mary Look Upon Us before the liturgy and then sing this for the communion hymn. Whatever connections you can make. There's nothing wrong with it. So then there's a G version for the faithful departed. And again, it starts with a perfect fourth, but it's in minor. Let us mystically holy, again, think high, represent the cherubim. Keep going. And sing of Christ's holy hymn to the light creating Trinity. Now set aside all earthly cares, all earthly cares. Okay, and everybody knows it. If I were singing it in church, the problem is you'll probably sing this 5 times to get through the procession. I would myself take it a little slower, but concentrate on really good breath support. So you'd sing it something like this. Let us mystically represent the cherubim. Okay? And it will take a little bit longer. You won't sing it quite as many times. It can be really lovely, even like at a funeral liturgy. But practice it and get the pitches just right. So that's 7 versions. And then back in the material for St. Nicholas Day and Christmas, there are 2 more versions. You do them exactly the same way. Okay? Let us mystically. Again, I'd sing it slow. And let us mystically represent the cherubim. And this is also a hymn that sometimes parishes have their own versions. I know one parish, for example, that has a version to a melody from the Paschal Canon that they use in Easter season. There are some others floating around. But wherever you do it, you will end up afterwards at the same place at page 49. Okay? After the great entrance, concluding the great entrance, there's a litany for the precious gifts placed before us. And then the priest invites everyone to be reconciled with each other so that we can profess the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then, in wisdom, let us be attentive. Anyone know why it says the doors, the doors?
They can't get close when it's packed.
Right. Right. This is the point at which the deacon was telling the people guarding the doors, make sure that the only people here are baptized Christians. Of course, for various reasons, we do not enforce that, at least in part, because sometimes we welcome people in to see the liturgy because it's really not a secret ceremony. And as long as we're not under persecution, it's not as critical that only believers be present. But then we sing the symbol of faith or the creed of the councils of Nicaea and Constantinople. 2 different versions. Again, one of them is a Russian version, and one of them is the Ukrainian or Galician version, and the second one's a little more festal. The first one is sort of a reciting tone. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. Yep, you're going to go flat on this if you're not very, very careful. And if you have a piano or a keyboard around, one of the things that I suggest is that you find your starting note on the piano and sing the creed and then play the note again at the end.
Yes.
And try to get your singing so that you are ending on the same key that you began in. Because it's a really good practice to see how your breathing's going. When you sing the creed, clarity is essential. The words are meant to be heard by us. Okay? This is what we believe. Okay? Very particular words chosen by the Church Fathers. So do not rush. I know, for example, I've sometimes heard, and in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the Creator of life, who proceeds from the Father. No. It's not a speed test. Okay? It's long enough that you have to keep it moving, but it should be stately and not rushed. And the same applies to the second one. I believe in one God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Okay, stop for a minute. I'm already hearing 3 different notes here. Because at the beginning it's tempting to go, I believe in one God the Father Almighty. You've already dropped. Okay? Think really high. Think precise. I believe in one God the Father Almighty. Better. Creator of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. And in one Lord Jesus Christ, okay, we got about 3 different tempos. Okay? And I'm here, and this is okay because different parishes will have different practices. Okay? And this is also what happens when nobody's leading. Okay, because you were all with me pretty much as long as I was singing, and then as soon as I wasn't, everybody's following because there wasn't somebody in charge. Think about what that means for your congregation. If they can't hear you leading, that's probably what it's going to sound like. Okay? The recording of this is on the website, but mostly I'm saying watch your pitch, watch your tempo and clarity, enunciate everything properly. If someone came into your church and heard the chanting of the creed, A, would they think you were talking about something that was important to you? And B, would they understand the words? Would they be able to say, oh, that's what Christians believe? Okay, yes, Ryan.
You mentioned earlier about trying not to rush through these things. Do you have any suggestions if you have aggressive parishioners that try to move things along and it's not much you can do?
Okay, this is somewhat controversial. I will say that there are certain times when, if it is still within the bounds of decency, sometimes the congregation takes off. The whole congregation. If it's one person, I would ignore them. Okay? Because it's also true that sometimes, for example, your priest may not be able to hear you very well up from the altar and he may be singing, people can be used to that. If the entire congregation is singing something, and singing it well, and decently, and in a prayerful fashion, I go with it. Okay? I would not try to bend them to my will. Okay? Just for the sake of doing it. Okay? Now, if, for example, the entire congregation was rushing the creed, then what I would do is I would probably talk to a half dozen people that were the louder singers in the congregation and saying, let's take the creed a little bit slower, next time. But if the congregational prayer sung prayer is good, don't mess with it. Okay, go with it. Get on the horse and keep going. But really, you can rush this somewhat terribly, and the problem is not so much going quickly, although that can be a problem, as the speeding up, because sometimes we like the long, luxurious endings of the phrase, and then we go really fast through the middle, and that's just bad. You would not read, for example, I believe in one God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven of all things visible and invisible. Somebody would look at you and say, what is wrong with that person? Yeah. So, think about how you read it. In fact, and this goes for everything, sometimes take a step back and read the text aloud. Read it like you'd read it to a child. Like you were reading a story. And then go back and sing it. And sometimes that will really improve what you're doing.